In the most recent episode of The Bad Batch, spoiler alert, we're reunited with everyone's favorite Wookiee, Gunji, or, soon to be favorite after this video, hopefully. Yes, I know Chewbacca is the OG Wookiee and every smuggler's best friend, and Black Chrysanthemum is pretty badass. You also have War Chief Tarful, a true leader for his people against both the Seppies and the Empire. But have you ever seen a Wookiee grow from childhood to adulthood? This is a unique opportunity that we might just have because of Gunji. Especially now that we know that Gunji as a Padawan has survived Order 66. What's really cool about Wookiees is they have a pretty long lifespan. They actually can live for several hundreds of years, I think like up to 400, even half a century. They're basically the opposite of doggos. They outlive their human owners. I mean, friends. Chewbacca, for instance, was just a bit over 200 years old by the time the First Order came to power, which means he'll be around for a while longer to provide us some type of continuity throughout the Star Wars lore. And Gunji, well, he's only 5 feet tall right now, which means he has centuries to grow to his full height. Now, unlike other species who live very long, Wookiees do not have proportionally longer childhoods when compared to their lifespan. Wookiees are considered young adults by the age of 12 and adults by the time they're 18 years old. And so Gunji, who was a Padawan, was most likely just a teenager when Order 66 happened. What makes Gunji so special is the fact that he can join the Jedi Order. You see, Wookiees rarely ever have Force sensitivity, which is kind of a shame because the Wookiees, with their harmonious relationship with their planet and nature, have always been natural allies to the Jedi. And so Gunji joining the Jedi Order at a very young age was a source of great pride for the Wookiees, especially the tribe he came from, which he probably doesn't know much about. Now, as far as we know, there have only been a handful of Wookiee Jedi in the lore. During the High Republic era, we had a Wookiee Jedi Master known as Arkoff, and the Padawan known as Buriyaga Agaburi. One of the most successful Wookiee Jedi would be Jedi Master Tivoka. He would join the Jedi High Council decades before the Clone Wars started, and in Legends, he was actually the Master of Plo Koon. Now, Gunji would be taken away from his family at a very young age, as was tradition for the Jedi Order. And so he wouldn't really remember much of Kashyyyk, although it's said that he did have dreams about his home world. Now, Gunji would come up in the Jedi Order at a very precarious time during the Clone Wars. Generally speaking, Jedi younglings were grouped together into small classes known as clans. A clan would be trained together in the basics of the Jedi arts by higher-ranking members of the Jedi Order. For instance, Grandmaster Yoda was famously known for training all of the Jedi that went through the system in basic lightsaber techniques, and the ancient Jedi Terra Senube was also known for his dueling instruction. Now, because the Clone Wars required so much of the Jedi, especially the Jedi Knights and Jedi Masters who served as commanders within the Grand Army of the Republic, I'm going to assume that the training for the Jedi younglings probably suffered during this period of time. So we first meet Gunji on a very special day. You see, his clan is about to go through a ritual known as the Gathering. An older Jedi or a Padawan, in Gunji's clan's case, Ahsoka Tano, would gather the younglings and take them to a very secret location for an important secretive ritual known as the Gathering. The Jedi Order actually had a monopoly on kyber crystals all across the galaxy. They had several different worlds with very rich deposits, which they jealously guarded. They didn't allow anyone to really touch these things. The largest trove of kyber crystals in the galaxy could be found on a planet known as Alum. Located in the unknown region, this icy planet was a well-hidden secret. The Jedi long ago built a temple on the planet that opens up into a massive crystal cave. And for generations, Jedi younglings would visit this temple and collect their first kyber crystal so that they can make their first lightsaber.
The Force, made physical, a Jedi is. Protect others. How does a Jedi? Build your own lightsaber, you shall.
Of course, one does not just walk inside the kyber crystal cave and just select his kyber crystal. That'd be too easy. Kyber was a living and semi-sentient organic crystal. It could communicate and bond with Force-sensitive individuals. And they're actually very picky on who they would usually select. Because when a Jedi wields a lightsaber, the Force flows through the crystal to the user. This is an extremely intimate moment. And so it's actually usually the kyber crystal that chooses the youngling and not the other way around. Now, for the Jedi youngling, you have to understand the excitement they felt here. The process of getting a lightsaber was something they looked forward to since they joined the Order. It's like getting your first dart bike or BB gun or car. It was a weapon, a tool that signified you weren't just some stupid kid, but a warrior, a Jedi. And even if these Jedi younglings never get selected by a older Jedi to become a Padawan, at least they'll still have their kyber crystals and lightsabers. The entrance of the kyber crystal cave was blocked by a wall of ice, which could be melted by a series of crystals which reflected sunlight into it. Now, normally sunlight wouldn't be able to pierce ice this thick this quickly. Now, the reason why kyber crystals were extremely valuable was because they had the ability to enhance energy. This meant that if you put 1 unit of energy into the kyber crystal, it could actually give you an output of more than 1 energy unit. This is why the Empire was so interested in these crystals for their super laser weapons. This is how the Death Star was able to destroy planets. The power amplification of these crystals was key. Galen Erso was one of the leading scientists in the crystal field. He worked on a program known as Project Celestial Power and believed that it was going to give trillions of sentient beings access to cheap energy. I mean, he wasn't completely wrong. The Death Star definitely gave a lot of energy to people in Alderaan, but it was just like too much energy in too small of a time window. Anyway, the ice wall would melt, revealing a giant door, and the younglings would enter the cave. But the ice wall would slowly begin to freeze over again as soon as they entered, and it would eventually turn into a solid wall. This created a sense of urgency for the Jedi younglings to find their crystals as soon as possible. A false sense of urgency, of course. It's not like these caves were littered with, Jedi youngling bones. Although I'm sure there's like a few sets. To make matters worse, the kyber crystal would test them and see if they were worthy of wielding them. And they did this by using the Force to manipulate the Jedi younglings. The sheer amount of kyber crystals in the cave channeling the Force could create powerful Force illusions, similar to the illusions we see on other powerful Force nexuses, like that cave on Dagobah. In Gunji's group, you had Petro, the young and confident human whose greatest flaw was his own arrogance. He was the top of his class, and so he was always in a rush to get things done. He would carelessly retrieve a crystal that was actually just a piece of ice. Then you had Gnodi, a Rhodian female. She got a bit flustered and overwhelmed by her own search for the crystals, and wouldn't succeed on finding her crystal until she remembered to connect to the Force to soothe her mind and find what she was looking for. Katuni, the Tholothean female, had to overcome her fear of heights by climbing to get her kyber crystal. Biff, the Ithorian male, was afraid of everything and had to overcome his general fear. Zat, the Nautolan male, loved technology and tried to use his scanner to find his crystal, which of course didn't work. It wasn't until he threw away the scanner that he would be able to find the crystal using the Force. Now, Gunji's problem was one that many Wookiee Jedi suffered, and that was his impatience. Gunji was just unable to stay still and wait for the right moment to strike usually. Now, Gunji would find his kyber crystal on an island in the middle of an icy lake. The sun was keeping that lake unfrozen, but the water was so cold that if Gunji tried to swim across, he probably would have gotten into trouble. And so Gunji's challenge was to just sit there and patiently wait for the sun to set, and for the water to freeze over so that he could cross the ice and get his kyber crystal. This trial had a profound impact on who this Wookiee youngling would eventually become. Being a warrior and impulsive usually meant a very short career. I have no doubt that the lesson Gunji learned here about being patient helped him survive Order 66. After successfully retrieving their crystals, all of the younglings would return back to the ship known as the Crucible. This was an ancient ship piloted by an even more ancient droid known as Professor Huyang. Think of him as the Mr. Ollivander of Star Wars. Instead of having a bunch of materials to assemble wands, Professor Huyang has all the materials needed to build a lightsaber. Now for Gunji, the droid has something very special in store.
What will make you strong in battle and humble in retreat? What connects with your Force? Yes, wood. Not a common choice.
And it couldn't be just any type of wood, it had to be a very strong type of wood. Preferably from Kashyyyk, where the trees reached up into the heavens for miles. Luck would have it, Professor Huyang actually had some samples of wood on his ship from Kashyyyk, and they were made out of brylark tree, which was as strong as metal. The Jedi younglings would assemble their lightsabers using the Force and prepare to return to Coruscant, where they would continue their journey and prepare for their initiate trials, which prepared them to become Padawans. Unfortunately, they run into the pirate Hondo Ohnaka, who set his eyes on the Crucible and the valuable kyber crystals on board. His pirates would interdict the Jedi ship and board it. Ahsoka Tano didn't want to risk the younglings, and so she asks them to hide while she confronts the pirates all by herself, which leads to her eventual capture. The pirates would bring her back to their home base on Florum, and the Jedi younglings, including Gunji, decided to go after her. While on Florum, the Jedi younglings run into a traveling circus, which they would use to infiltrate the pirate base. This would be their first real test, and the first time younglings would get to wield their lightsabers in combat. Gunji, of course, would be very eager to test himself. The younglings would be successful at retrieving Ahsoka, but at the same time, General Grievous and a droid task force would launch an attack against Florum. Again, this was a very unlucky gathering. At one point, Gunji almost has to go up against General Grievous in lightsaber combat, but luckily the Jedi Order's most powerful Padawan Ahsoka was there to save the day. In a lot of ways, I think Gunji was lucky he got to have the experiences he did after the gathering. I mean, it really did test him as a youngling, and it helped him become more prepared for his future, trials and ordeals. I really love this idea of introducing a younger Wookiee into the Star Wars lore that is Force sensitive. It gives us a lot of things to look forward to, and Wookiees are basically everyone's favorite aliens anyway. So, well done. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy.